The Santa Rosa Hitchhiker Murders were a chilling series of brutal homicides committed between 1972 and 1973 in Sonoma County, California. There was at least 7 young women, all hitchhikers, who were brutally murdered with their nude bodies disposed in rural areas, down the bottom of a steep embankment and ravines, just left there to rot by their murderer. These victims ranged in age from 12 years old to 23 years old, and all of their deaths were marked by these eerie similarities, things that linked the cases to one another. The absence of clothing, the sexual assaults. Despite extensive, intense investigations, this cold-blooded murderer remains unidentified. And whilst this case remains unsolved and the perpetrator remains unidentified, there is a list of suspects out there that includes the Zodiac Killer, Ted Bundy, to name a few. And we are going to discuss every single one of these suspects today to try and work out or theorise who we believe that murderer might have been. This is the harrowing and devastating case of the Santa Rosa Hitchhiker Murders. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another true crime and makeup episode. Oh yeah. Today we are diving right into this unsolved case, and listen, I just want to halt you there, right? Put the brakes on before you cross out this video. These cases are so important. I am very much like you. I hate when things don't have a conclusion. But we need to remember that these cases, they're not just stories that we're telling on the internet. This is people's real lives. These are real victims who lost their lives, and their stories deserve to be shared as much as anyone else. And they need to be shared because someone out there somewhere might know something that would help close this case. With that being said, please make sure you engage with this video in some way. It would mean the world to me if you could share it, help boost the algorithm, get that video out there, because you never know who might see it. If you are new here, hi, my name is Anna. I am a certified yapper, and one day I decided I'm going to hop on the internet, I'm going to yap about true crime, the thing I am most passionate about, and hopefully find a community of people like myself. And I found you. Now, if true crime is your jam, I highly suggest you subscribe, get the notification bell on, because I am here for you twice a week, every single week, with a brand new interesting true crime case. And if you're a regular here, if you are an OG, you already know the drill. Get down in the likes, get down in the comments, leave your comment, share this video if you feel obliged. It really helps me out. But if you could just engage with this video in some way, just to help boost the algorithm and really push my content out there, it would mean the entire world to me. Any details you need regarding me, myself and I, any case suggestion documents, my social media handles, or any products used on my face today, it will all be listed down below for you. But without any further rambling and any further ado, let's get into the case of the Santa Rosa Hitchhiker Murders. So when it comes to the victims of the Santa Rosa Hitchhiking Murders, the victims all had commonalities. That's how the murders were all linked in the first place. From the victim type being teenage girls to young women, a lot of them being very avid hitchhikers who would hitchhike often and didn't really believe or see the danger in hitchhiking, and also the method in which they were killed. Now, there is so many theories about who might have committed these murders. And I think if we're going to sit here today and we're going to review this case, it's only fair that I tell the victim stories and then talk about the possible perpetrators at the end, just so we have a clear picture of how this person operated, who they targeted, and how they disposed of these poor victims. So the first known victims of this case is a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old girl. This was 12-year-old Maureen Louise Sterling and also 13-year-old Yvonne Lisa Weber. Both of these young girls, they had attended Herbert Slater Middle School, and not only did they attend the same school, but they were like really close friends. They kind of did everything together. Now, both of these young girls, they had the same sort of hobbies and interests, so they did spend a lot of time outside of school together. And on February the 4th of 1972, this was no different. The girls had decided that they were going to go to the Redwood Empire Ice Arena, which in the UK we would call it an ice rink. I don't know if that's like a worldwide thing or if it's just here, I'm not sure. But it's referred to here as the Ice Arena. So they were attending that on the 4th of February. They were going there with the intention to skate, have a good time, have a laugh together, maybe see other friends if they're there as well. They could never have known that something that was an exciting and enjoyable activity for them could become so sinister and would be the last activity that they ever did together. So the girls, they have such a good time together. They've been skating for a few hours and it's time to head home. And like many people did in this era, the girls think, you know, the easiest way for us to get home is going to be to hitchhike as usual. So the girls, they hitchhike a ride and they would both last be seen hitchhiking on Gurneville Road, northwest of Santa Rosa. Also, as I'm doing this, all I can hear is Drop Dead Fred. Do you know that film, Drop Dead Fred? And him saying, "Oh, it looked like a big bruise." That's how I feel with this eye look. Now, when the girls had been at this ice rink, they actually did bump into one of their friends. And the girls, they started telling this friend about a tall, slender man who had asked them if they wanted to go and smoke marijuana. Now, the girls and this friend, they were sort of hanging around together at this point, and the young girls were thinking, you know, he seems cool, like he's an older guy, we could totally go and smoke some marijuana with him, get to know him. But the friend didn't want to do this. And the friend decides, like, you know, you do you, boo, but I'm leaving this situation. I don't want to be involved. So the friend, she would head home, and of course the girls, they would go to meet this man. And as we know, this was the last day that they were ever seen. Now, this friend who had been at the ice rink, she had claimed that the man who she had spotted in the ice lobby, like the lobby outside the arena, looked exactly like Ted Bundy. This friend also stated that Maureen and Yvonne, they looked years older. They didn't look like 12 and 13-year-olds, like they could pass for maybe 17, 18 with the way that they dressed, the little bit of makeup that they wore. But I mean, if this was Ted Bundy, it really doesn't matter because we all know his youngest victim was like, what, 12? So this wouldn't matter to him. Now, this friend would do interviews and speak again as late as 2024, and this friend had claimed that the man that she had seen actually looked a lot like Jim Mordesha. Now, we are going to get into him further down the line, so I'm not going to hover on that too long because we will take a look at him later on. But Ted Bundy, Jim Mordesha, at first she was absolutely certain that it was Ted Bundy, but then as she got older, she said it resembled more Jim Mordesha, so I don't know. I'll put up the photos. What do you think? Could there be a similarity that she was getting mixed up between the two? You let me know. The reason I ask that question is just because a lot of people, when she changed the name of the man that she had seen from Ted Bundy to Jim Mordesha, they had felt like possibly she was just doing these interviews for clout, which I wouldn't think you would do that when it's your friends who have lost their lives. But unfortunately, there is people in the world like that, so I just want to know your honest opinion. Do you think she could have mistaken one for the other? And it's just awful, but these young girls, they would be missing for quite a while before their bodies were discovered. Their bodies wouldn't be located until December the 28th of 1972, and they were 2.2 miles north of Porter Creek Road on Franz Valley Road. And their bodies had just been discarded off the side of the road down a steep embankment. Now, when the remains of these young girls were eventually found, both of the young girls were completely skeletonized and they were able to be identified by belongings that were around them, specifically an earring and a necklace. So there was earrings that one of the girls had been wearing, and it was like an earring with like dangly orange beads, and then there was also a 14-carat cross necklace. And Maureen's mother, she was able to identify that the necklace found was that of her daughter's. And it's honestly just soul destroying to think of a parent in this situation when their daughter's been missing and they potentially think that something bad might have happened to them, and then they hear that remains are found, but it's skeletonized bodies, and the only thing you have to identify your daughter with is an earring and a necklace. Now, because the girls' remains were completely skeletonized when they were located, unfortunately, their cause of death couldn't even be determined, but investigators had found like materials that you would use for binding people in the brush nearby, and they had determined that both of these young girls had been restrained by their murderer. Next we have Kim Wendy Allen. She was a 19-year-old art student at the Santa Rosa College. Now, she was someone who hitchhiked very frequently. She was an avid hitchhiker. She done this all the time to get to where she was going. Her mother and even her college professor had tried to tell her the dangers of hitchhiking, how risky it was, and how every person you come across on the road might not be as genuine as they seem. But for Kim, because this was something she did so often, she met good people on the road, people who looked after her, made sure she was getting to where she was going, and because she had so many positive experiences, she never once believed that she would ever come across anyone evil, and she was certain that if that day ever did come, she would recognise it right away and know not to get in their vehicle. Her mother and also her college professor had warned her that men or women on the road, sometimes you will get those creeps that are just looking for young girls to pick up, to rape, assault, murder. You just never know. And Kim, despite the warnings that her parent and her professor had given her, she still looked at people and seen the best in them. She still believed that people had intentions as pure as her own, and she would continue to hitchhike. So on March the 4th of 1972, Kim would accept a ride off of two men from her job at Larkspur Natural Foods, and she was heading to San Rafael. But these men, when Kim had actually been reported missing, they went and they spoke to the investigators, and they had said that the last time they seen Kim was around 5:20 p.m. on March the 4th, and she was hitchhiking to school near the Bell Avenue entrance to Highway 101. Now, when they had seen her, she was carrying this large wooden soy barrel that had big Chinese letters on them, and Kim would not be declared missing for very long because, devastatingly, on March the 5th, 1972, her body would be discovered. Her body would be discovered at the bottom of an embankment in a creek bed, and this was just 20 feet off Enterprise Road in Santa Rosa. And poor Kim, it was evident that she had been bound at the ankles, at the wrists, she had been brutally raped, and they could tell that her cause of death was a slow strangulation. And they believe that Kim was being strangled for 30 minutes straight. They believe this killer was sadistic because it seemed as though they were strangling her to the point that she would nearly pass out and then stop, and then do it again and then stop, and do this for 30 minutes until eventually strangling her to death. It's honestly horrific to think of someone in the scariest situation of their lives, and this sadistic, evil murderer is almost playing with them like they're some kind of toy. Now, investigators, they had been able to recover semen from the scene, and on the embankment they had seen what they believed was a foot and leg impression on the soil, and this basically told them that whoever was transporting Kim's body, whilst they were trying to move her, it looked as though they themselves had slipped. But this didn't give investigators anything. Alongside Kim's body, there was also one singular hoop earring located. And it's kind of a reoccurring theme, right? The first girls, there was one earring. Kim, there's one earring. It's like the murderer is taking trophies. If you're wondering if the men from the day before, if they had been spoken to by investigators, they absolutely had. They were quickly ruled out as suspects, and one of the men, they had even taken and passed a polygraph test. And I'll be honest, I did kind of think, well, why did one do it and not the other? But I suppose if they were travelling together, it would make sense that anything that was done, they would both be involved in, so maybe that's why police ruled it out. I don't know. I don't know, I wasn't there, believe it or not. Now, just 20 days after Kim's murder, her chequebook would be deposited. This was in a drive-up mailbox from the Kentfield post office, and police did hope that they would be able to retrieve some sort of fingerprints off this, maybe run it through another system or records, whatever they had back then. But yet again, nothing came from this. Now, police also noted that when Kim's body had been discovered, her right side of her body had some sort of oily substance on it, and it appeared to be the kind of oil that you would find in like a machine shop. So they're thinking that might narrow the suspect pool, as it's someone who works in machinery. But yet again, nothing came of this. So then on November the 11th of 1972, the mother of Laurie Lee Kursa, who was a 13-year-old student at Lawrence Cook Middle School, she reported her daughter missing after they had been shopping at USave. It was stated that she had last been seen alive on November the 20th or the 21st, and it was determined that she had deliberately gone missing. She had ran away so she could go and visit her friends. There was also a reported sighting of Laurie on November the 30th, but unfortunately this could not be confirmed whether it was Laurie or not, so they go by her last date being alive as either November the 20th or the 21st. Laurie was someone who ran away from home quite often. She was also an avid hitchhiker. She would hitchhike whenever she ran away from home as a means to travel. But devastatingly, on December the 14th of 1972, Laurie's frozen remains would be found in a ravine, and this ravine was just 50 feet off Calistoga Road, and this was northeast of Rincon Valley in Santa Rosa. When Laurie's body had been examined, her cause of death was ruled as a broken neck with compression and hemorrhage of her spinal cord. Now thankfully, when her body was being examined, it was concluded that she hadn't been raped, and the dates that investigators had thought would have been her last days alive sort of worked out that way, as it was concluded that she would have passed away roughly 1 to 2 weeks before her body was found. But I mean, for me, honestly, that sounds as though it would rule in the November 30th sighting of Laurie, the one that they couldn't confirm. If her body was there 1 to 2 weeks, 14 days is 2 weeks, so that would be December the 14th, take it right back, November the 30th. So for me, those dates work out, but again, I wasn't there, I wasn't the witness. Now, when it was revealed that Laurie was missing, someone did call in a report basically saying that they had seen her, and they had seen her with 2 men. Now, another sighting was called in, and this time it said that Laurie was with a bushy-haired Caucasian man in a pickup truck. I hear bushy-haired Caucasian man and I do picture Ted Bundy, but let's be honest, back then there was a lot of bushy-haired Caucasian men. There was another witness who had claimed to see Laurie between December the 2nd and December the 9th. They had claimed that Laurie was being held up by 2 men. Like, she looked like she was physically impaired, she was unable to hold herself up. These 2 men were kind of, grabbing her under the arms and taking her wherever they were taking her. And then they witnessed them shove Laurie into the back of a van. And if you're ever unsure, call it in, because if it's no an abduction, everything will be fine. But if it is, potentially you could save someone's life. So police believe this theory that Laurie might have been abducted by 2 men, forced into a van, stripped of all her clothing, and then they believe that as this van was driving along, potentially Laurie trying to escape, she had opened the passenger side door and thrown herself out of the van down a steep embankment where she possibly would have broken her neck. They believe that once she had did this, the men might have just seen her and thought, there's no point going back for her, she's most likely dead or something like that. Because Laurie did have a broken neck, this would mean at the bottom of this embankment, at this ravine, she wouldn't have been able to move, but also her injuries wouldn't have killed her right away. So if she did jump out as a means of survival, she would have lay there unable to move until she passed away, which is absolutely soul destroying. So then on February the 6th of 1973, a young 15-year-old girl by the name of Carolyn Nadine Davis, she had ran away from her home. So her home was outside of Anderson in Shasta County, and she would spend the next 5 months travelling, which of course, as we know, would involve a lot of hitchhiking. So Carolyn, she left a note for her mother, and this note had said, "Dear Mom, don't worry too much about me. The only thing I'm going to be doing is keeping myself alive. Love, Carolyn." Now, her older sister had claimed that Carolyn had stopped off at her duplex apartment in Garberville? I think it's Garberville, but this was in California. Now, when her sister had asked, why have you stopped by? Like, I heard you were going to be travelling for the next 5 months. She had claimed that Carolyn told her that she had witnessed a double murder and that she was in fear of her life. Carolyn, at this point, she becomes increasingly worried. She's increasingly paranoid, as one would be if you witnessed a double murder. But she was worried that she was putting her sister in danger and that whoever it was that had committed this murder might be looking for her and might track her down to her sister's apartment, putting her in danger. So Carolyn, at this point, she decides to leave and she would hitchhike to Illinois. Then in the summer of 1973, she would return for 2 weeks where she would spend some time living with her grandmother. The reason that she had come back was because her sister was actually pregnant. She was going to give birth. She wanted to be there. She then stated to her grandmother that she was going to return to Illinois via hitchhiking so she could be with her boyfriend, and she would last be seen hitchhiking on July the 15th. Also, I'm just giving myself like mega 70s vibes with this makeup, and I cannot stop singing Saturday Night Fever songs. So devastatingly, on July the 31st of 1973, in Santa Rosa, only 3 feet from where Lisa and Yvonne were found, Carolyn's remains would be discovered. Now, her cause of death would be ruled as strychnine poisoning, and they were like guesstimating that this would have been 10 to 14 days before the discovery of her body. Now, when they had examined her body, they couldn't decide whether or not the strychnine had been administered via needle or whether she had ingested a pill. When they examined her bloods and obviously examined her system, there was no heroin or amphetamines in her system. It didn't seem as though she had taken like a cocktail of drugs. It did seem like someone else had given her this, and Carolyn had no idea. Now, the investigators, they couldn't determine whether or not Carolyn had been raped, and next to her body, they actually discovered this witchcraft symbol, and this symbol meant carrier of spirits. Right. Now, in 1975, the police would disclose further information on this. They had stated that the symbol was made out of twigs. It was a rectangle connected to a square with bars running alongside. This was deemed to be an occult symbol that dated all the way back to medieval England, and this had suggested to police that Carolyn's murder might have been linked to the Zodiac Killer. So then in the winter of 1973, 23-year-old Theresa Diane Smith Walsh, she had left her home in Miranda to take some time away from her husband and her son. Now, Theresa, like many of the other girls, she was an avid hitchhiker. She would often hitchhike along Highway 101. She had never been in any danger. She had always had quite a pleasant experience with the people she hitchhiked with. So she didn't really see any risk in this. So in late December of 1973, Theresa, she was in Malibu and she decided that she wanted to go home, see her mother and see her son. It's Christmas time. She wanted to be with her family. And she was last seen on December the 22nd of 1973 at Zuma Beach in Malibu. Now, it was from this beach in Malibu that she was about to start her hitchhiking back to Garberville. And disturbingly, it would only be 6 days later when Theresa's body was found in Mark West Creek by a group of kayakers. She was partially submerged. It was evident that she had been hog-tied with clothesline rope. They also determined that she had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. Upon examining her body, it was clear that Theresa had been dead for at least a week before she was located. This is just a young woman wanting to go home to her mum and her son and her husband. Like, she's just thinking about getting home to her family, and then she could run into someone so evil who was just going to take all of this away from her. Now, the final confirmed victim of this murderer or murderers is known as the Sonoma County Jane Doe. Her skeletal remains were found on July the 2nd of 1979, and it was found in a ravine that was around 100 yards away from where Laurie's body had been located. Now, authorities, when they had found her remains, they initially thought that this was the body of, Jeanette Kamaheli, but later on they would do a comparison with the teeth on the remains and with Jeanette's dental records, and they were able to establish that the body they found was not in fact Jeanette's. This victim had been hog-tied yet again, and they had suffered from a fractured arm at the time of their murder. And this poor young woman's corpse had been stuffed into a duffel bag and then just disposed of. And unfortunately, they were not able to confirm her cause of death. They could not determine whether or not this young girl had been sexually assaulted, and she remains a Jane Doe to this very day. Now, investigators, as time went on, they had said that they believe that the victim they've found was between 16 and 21 years old. They wore contacts, they had either red, auburn or brown hair, and they said she would have been around 5'3". She had previously had a broken rib, which by the time of her murder had already healed, so this is something that happened, years or months prior, however long it takes to heal, before her murder. In terms of her eye colour and her weight, this could not be determined, and there was no clothes found around her or nearby her that they would be able to use to help someone identify her. Now, of course, there is people out there who is thought to be possible victims of this killer or killers, but ultimately when police carried out their investigation, certain things didn't line up or link in the way that it does for these victims. There is quite a few big names in this case when it comes to the suspects, and starting off right off the bat, I've already mentioned them, the Zodiac Killer. They were one of the main suspects in the Santa Rosa Hitchhiker Murders. One of the main reasons that they had suspected that the Zodiac Killer could potentially have been the Santa Rosa Hitchhiker Murderer. Sorry, that's a mouthful. Now, the reason they thought it was possible that the Zodiac Killer was a Santa Rosa Hitchhiker Murderer was because of similarities between an unknown symbol that he had wrote on his January the 29th, 1974 exorcist letter to the San Francisco Chronicle that had claimed that he had taken 37 victims. And then the Chinese characters on the soy barrel that Kim Allen was carrying. They thought the similarities between that linked the Zodiac Killer to these murders. And in case you don't know the Zodiac case, in another letter they had stated that they were going to start varying their modus operandi, stating that when they commit their murders, they're going to make it look like routine robberies gone wrong, they're going to make it look like accidents, or just angry, senseless killings. Now, the reason that the police had ruled out the Zodiac Killer eventually was because these murders, the Santa Rosa murders, they had sexual assault involved in them, whereas the Zodiac killings did not. So the next suspect they had was a man by the name of Arthur Lee Allen. He had owned a mobile home at the Sunset Trailer Park in Santa Rosa. Now, he owned this at the time of the murders. He'd also previously been fired from a teaching position when he was accused of child molestation. And then on September the 27th of 1974, he would be arrested and charged with a separate, unrelated child molestation case. This man is just a complete vicious animal going after young children, and I believe the one that he was charged in was a young boy. Now, he had pled guilty on March the 14th of 1975, and he would be housed at Atascadero State Prison. We know many people from Atascadero. I believe Edmund Kemper was there, to name a few. Well, to name one, but still. Now, there's a book called Zodiac Unmasked, right? And in this book, it basically says that on the Santa Rosa hitchhiking victims, there was like chipmunk hairs that were found. And apparently, Arthur Lee Allen was studying and collecting this exact species of chipmunk. And not only was Arthur Lee Allen considered like the main suspect for the Santa Rosa hitchhiking murders, he was also deemed to be the main suspect in the Zodiac Killer case. And the thing is, like, make it make sense, because they ruled out the Zodiac because there was sexual assault at the crime scenes, but Arthur Lee Allen molests children, which would say that there could be sexual assault. But, make up your mind, does the Zodiac act in that way or not? Because it's kind of contradicting. And then we have the rat-faced evil monster that is Ted Bundy. I hate this guy. He gets requested quite a lot for me to cover, but I don't know if he's just too overdone. If anyone would even want to hear it, let me know. Now, when he was captured for his horrifying murders is when he would be suspected in the Santa Rosa murders, because he had spent time in the neighbouring county of Marin. Now, he was first ruled out in the late 1970s and again in 1989. The reason he was ruled out was because detailed credit card records had been reviewed, and they showed that at the time of the Santa Rosa murders, Ted Bundy was in Washington when the Santa Rosa girls were disappearing. So ultimately they believe it couldn't be him. However, an article came out in the San Francisco Chronicle in 2011 that stated that with the times on the credit card receipts, it would be possible that Ted Bundy could travel back to Santa Rosa, commit the murders, and then return to Washington. Listen, Bundy was known to travel to murder. He would travel hundreds of miles just to get a murder victim. So it's not impossible. And let's not forget that Ted Bundy had even confessed to murdering in California. It could all add up. Now, the reason that Bundy was ultimately ruled out overall was because they were starting to believe that the murderer would have been someone local to Santa Rosa, who knew rural locations, who knew back roads, who knew their way around as a means to not get caught. So next we have Frederick Manali. He was 41 years old and he was a junior college creative writing instructor. And it wouldn't be until this man died that he would actually become a suspect. So in 1976, he would be involved in a fatal head-on collision on Highway 12, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. When his belongings were searched, they had discovered sadomasochistic drawings of a former student. That student, Kim Allen, one of the victims in this case, he had created sadomasochistic drawings of this victim. Not only this, but they also discovered other horrifying drawings of him and other young girls doing all this sadomasochistic stuff. And not only this, police would find one of Kim's backpacks in his possession. What? Why does he have Kim's backpack and where did he get it? And then we have the disgusting serial rapist that is Jack Alexander Boken. He actually died in prison in 2021. I want to say he was like 78 years old. Now, he became a possible suspect after DNA testing in 2022. We just missed him, folks. Now, this DNA testing had linked him to the 1996 murder of a young woman by the name of Michelle Veal. Now, at the time of Jack's death, he was imprisoned for a series of brutal rapes on women. Not only this, but he was also imprisoned for the 1997 attempted murder of a 19-year-old girl. It's all adding up. And this guy, he had been committing assaults and getting in trouble for things like rape and battery since the age of 21. So since 1964? 1960. My math ain't good, but I think 1964. And then very lastly, Jim Murdasha, who we mentioned, I think, at the beginning of this case. Now, he was a high school vocational agricultural teacher. He was a man that had absolutely no criminal record and he would pass away from cancer in 2008. Now, I know, sounds like a normal guy, like someone who we don't need to worry about, until his family started going through his belongings. His family, while searching through his belongings, found this small, secret, hidden little box of mismatched female jewellery. One of these things being an orange beaded earring. But cast your mind back to the first two murders, the orange beaded earring, one was found and that's what helped identify one of the young girls. This was in his little mismatched female jewellery box. And I know what you're thinking, you know, hopefully his family turned that over to the police, got it examined, and then, who knows, maybe they could have closed that case for good. But no. See, what his family did is they disposed of that evidence. They disposed of the mismatched female jewellery. His DNA profile and other information about him was turned over to the Sonoma County Sheriff Department in 2022. So, how many years is that? 14 years that went by. His family had disposed of the one thing that might have gave some closure on this case. Like, what was going through their minds? No good can come for that little box. So whether or not you throw it away doesn't take away whether he did it or not. But ultimately, that is all the information we have regarding the Santa Rosa Hitchhiker Murders. Like, no one knows for a fact who committed these crimes. And honestly, like, I don't know what I believe, because as I was going through the theories of who it could be, each individual suspect, I was like, yeah, you know what, could be them, but I don't know. It just seems like everyone had a possible connection to the murders. But if I had to say the one that was most compelling for me would probably be Jim Murdasha, because he had the orange beaded earring. But then again, this could have been somebody else's orange beaded earring. I know that. I don't know. But I mean, honestly, I have no idea, because there's a lot of feasible suspects in there who it could be. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Please let me know down below who you believe was responsible for these murders. Do you believe it was anyone in the list that I gave? Or do you think it could possibly be someone else? As always, I do just want to remind you guys that the people spoken about in this video today are human beings whose lives were brutally taken from them. But there's so much more than that. Every single one of these young women, young girls, they were loved and adored by people in their life, and they are missed greatly every single day. And so please just send your love, your thoughts, your prayers to the families affected in this case. And I am sending so much peace to the young women who lost their lives. But my loves, that is it for another true crime and makeup episode. I really hope this one was interesting for you. I know a lot of you are like me. The unsolved stuff really annoys you, which I totally get because I hate not having like a conclusion. But it's important that these stories are told because at the end of the day, they're not just stories. This is people's lives. This is what happened to people, and these cases need more light shed on them because there might be someone out there who knows something. And if we use our platforms and our voices to talk about this, we could make a positive change. If you do enjoy my content, please make sure you do subscribe, get that notification bell on because I'm here for you every single week, twice a week on a Wednesday and Sunday. All the details you need regarding me, myself and I can all be found in the description down below. That will give you my social media handles, my case suggestion document, or you can leave case suggestions in the comments if you would prefer. I add them all to a big list anyway, so whatever's easiest for you. And in case you want the details of any products used on my face today, they will also be listed down below for you. But that is it for today. Please, please, please remember, be a good person. Do not be a bad person. Stay safe, look after each other, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!